Aloha Aina, and welcome to Voices of Truth, one-on-one with Hawaii's future, brought to you by the Kiwani Foundation. I'm Ahu Keikahu Cardwell, and here we are today on the windward side of Oahu, and I'll tell you this right now, we have a fascinating guest on the show, so let's go on over here and meet her. Routh, aloha.
Aloha.
Routh Bolomet, did I say your name right?
You did.
Wonderful. Routh, we wanted to have you on the show today because you're somebody who is in a very special and unique situation with respect to your home and the land that you have and the land that you live on.
It started out in 2010 when my neighbor brought to my attention that we were being charged the same amount of property tax with our agricultural exemption as he was for his regular property tax without any exemption. So he asked me, what's the advantage? Well, when I looked at it, I saw that we were in fact being charged more than the neighbors, and that caused me to go and challenge it.
Okay.
And I went to the review board, and even the review board wouldn't follow their own instructions that were in the administrative rules. So then I went, I was frustrated, and I said I wasn't going to give up because it was like a $20,000 overcharge.
$20,000?
Yes,
This
over
is
several
not like
years.
10 or 12 bucks.
No.
Wow.
So that was my motivation to keep looking and understanding. Basically, one of the employees at the property tax board suggested, because I was Hawaiian, to put in for the Kuleana land tax exemption. So I went ahead and I filled out the paperwork. I submitted it to OHA, who does the approvals.
Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And then they, the person in charge of approving it, called me and said, I'm sorry, we can't approve you because you don't own your land. Now that was very alarming, since my husband and I bought our land in cash in 1998. So I asked her what makes her believe that we don't own our land. We have the warranty deed. She said, well, actually, these are the king's lands, which they call the crown lands. Other people call it ceded lands. And these lands were made inalienable in 1864 under the Hawaiian Kingdom legislature, under an act. And it was enacted on January 3rd, 1865. So at that time, there was no way that the property board was even in business at that time, so they couldn't have any kind of title that would have been higher than the king's title. The king couldn't have transferred it. All the transfers would have had to happen before January 3rd, 1865, when the act came into place. So basically, most people are familiar with this act, but they didn't see how it connects to our lands. And the act was King Kamehameha V was trying to protect the land so it wouldn't be sold, because the lands, all the income from it was actually paying for the executive branch, for the king and his staff. And so it was a way to keep the people from being taxed.
Okay, Ruth, so let me ask you a question. How is it possible, if the state of Hawaii claims that you don't own the land, then how can they tax you?
They can't, but they are. And the way they're doing
But
it—
that's illegal, yes?
Yes, it is. It is illegal, and it's based on their the Organic Act and the Newlands Resolution, or that's what they're saying gives them the right. They pretend that the Newlands Resolution was a treaty. It was not. They pretend that the Organic Act gave them the right to create a government in the Hawaiian Islands. Therefore, they assert their jurisdictional authority upon these lands.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. What you're saying, if I understand you correctly, Ruth, is that the Organic Act and the Newlands Resolution, they're using to say that Hawaii is part of the United States, when you're saying, in fact, it is not part of the United States.
That's
this
correct.
This is an illegal U.S. occupation. But still, even so, how can they tax you when they claim you don't own the land? Just like if somebody tried to tax me, I have to pay tax on the car that you own and I don't. I mean, would I pay a tax like that? Of course not.
No. But what they're saying is in the 1900s, when they enacted the Organic Act, that the lands that belonged to the king, King Kamehameha III, his private allodial title lands, were transferred to the United States.
Okay,
But
that's what they claim.
that's what they claim. But an allodial title, which is an ownership in perpetuity with no higher lord, and it specifically says it cannot have eminent domain, it cannot be taxed, and it cannot be policed.
Okay.
So these unique titles that belong to the king and to other people were kind of overlooked, and the U.S. government decided to do their own thing. You know, they decided they were going to, in fact, ignore the allodial title and become the higher lord. But we know for sure that they knew the truth because they put it into a trust, and now they're saying they're the trustees of the trust on the beneficiary's behalf, which you've probably heard the term native tenant rights. So they assert that the Hawaiian people have native tenant rights. But in fact, if you look at the words, native would refer to Hawaiians, but tenants refers to the people who live in the specific ahupua'a.
Ruth, I'm going to assume that when you discovered you were paying those $20,000 more in tax, that you began to do research that allowed you to discover all of these concepts and ideas that you've just shared with us right now, yes?
Yes.
And I'm also going to assume that when you found out about the inequities and illegalities of all this stuff, that basically, wait a minute, something's wrong here, that you probably stopped paying those taxes, yes?
I stopped paying the taxes, and I demanded that I put in claims to my title insurance company to invoke the title insurance. And the title insurance refused to pay me, saying that in fact they only recognize U.S. law, and that they believed, or they were saying I believed that the U.S. law wasn't intact, but they were saying it's intact through the Organic Act and through the Newlands Resolution. So in fact, they were asserting the wrong laws upon these lands.
Okay, so Ruth, already it sounds to me like you're a person that's kind of caught between two worlds, yes?
Yes.
You're in a no man's land, or in your case, a no woman's land.
Yes.
And it's like, where do I go from here? What do I do? So what did you do?
So what I did was, there were two things that I did. First, I demanded to speak to corporate counsel through the property tax division.
In the state of Hawaii?
In the state of Hawaii, the city and county of Honolulu. So the city and county of Honolulu property tax said no, they won't get involved until you're $10,000 behind in the rears. So I said, okay, I'll stop paying, you know, so I can get to the $10,000 and we could start working through this. $345,000 is what we paid for our land. In cash, gone. You know, they're saying we don't own it. I want to know, how do I get my money back? But I also realized there is equity that's not covered by the property taxes. And I'm like, wait a minute, how do I get my equity out of here? Not only do I have lost present day equity, I have future lost equity because we weren't planning to sell. So, you know, till maybe the future. So I'm saying, well, how do we get our money out of this? And that's when I really started looking at all the different avenues. And the bank, what I learned was the bank wasn't going to be any help. I asked them to continue to help me, and they said, the person that was helping us said, the only way we can help you is you have to be 90 days late, 90 days delinquent. And I said, so you want me to stop making payments? Well, we can't advise you to do that. But if you want us to start researching, you have to be 90 days late. What I later learned was, in banking, there's what's called delinquency policies. So when you are 90 days late, the bank gets paid on the 91st day in full. So I didn't know that at the time. So we went ahead and played by their game rules. But they continued, even when we got past the 91 days, they continued to say that we had to pay, that all of our deeds, everything was correct. So we went ahead and I said, well, I will pay as soon as you can show me that my deed can lawfully be used to sell this land, because I don't want to be held accountable for a fraud. I go, because right now it looks like I was fraudulently selling this land. If I sell it, then I am perpetuating and participating in a fraud, and I will have to, if I go to trial over something like this, I'll have to give all the money back, so I'll lose again. So my only choice that I could see was going down this very pono long road of trying to figure out how to make things right. That led me to the UN. Because
The United Nations?
To the United Nations.
Wow, that's one giant leap.
It's a leap because the way the banks retaliated on me, because I refused to make any payments, was they put us in foreclosure. So when I went through the foreclosure process with the judge, I was talking about what's called the doctrine of political question. The doctrine of political question is when only a foreign nation can talk to a foreign nation, and the only one that could do that is the President of the United States.
So wait a minute, Ruth, you had to educate yourself on a global political level at this point because of all this, yes?
Yes. We could not get any justice here. And basically what I realized was I was asking the criminal to bring justice to me. And so I needed to go outside.
The criminal being?
The U.S. and the state of Hawaii. They were the ones perpetuating a fraud. And the fraud is that, that the state of Hawaii is located in the Hawaiian Islands.
Wait a minute. The state of Hawaii is the Hawaiian Islands, isn't it?
No, not according to their jurisdictional descriptions.
To their jurisdictional
Yes.
description?
If you look at the state of Hawaii Constitution, Article 15 on boundaries, it never mentions any of our Hawaiian islands.
What does it mention?
It mentions what it's not, but it never mentions what it is.
You're kidding.
So if you follow that description, it could be the islands off of Japan. You know, it doesn't say what it is specifically. So what's really interesting is I found in the Internal Revenue Code definitions, and under 7701 section number 10, item 10, it talks about a description of a state. And in there it says, if something is excluded, it cannot be included in the definitions. So it clearly does not include the Hawaiian Islands. The inhabited Hawaiian Islands, the whole archipelago is not described. So
what you're saying is, we may not know where the state of Hawaii is, but one thing we do know is it ain't in the Hawaiian Islands.
That's correct. And actually we kind of do know where it is because it's a corporation. And the corporation is registered in Washington, D.C. and 10 square miles of Washington, D.C.
So the state of Hawaii, you're saying, is not an area of land, it's a legal concept.
Yes, a legal entity.
Wow.
Which is not here.
All right, Ruth, now let me ask you this. Obviously, you had to really educate yourself in ways that you'd never had to know before. How did you get this legal education? How did you know how to read this stuff and this is what it means and that's what it doesn't mean and stuff like that?
Well, I did have some help by people that knew Hawaiian constitutional law and understood the land issues and land title issues. So I did get some help there, but I mostly got help from my great-grandfather, who has since passed. His name was John Mahi'ai Kaniakua, and he was one of the people that assisted Queen Liliuokalani. So he would tell the stories of the kingdom to my grandmother, and she used to whisper it in my ears when I was like sleeping with her from the ages of 2 to 6. So I kind of remembered certain things, and as I would read it, I'd go, oh, wait a minute, was this what she was talking about? But even when I would be typing up the responses to courts, it's like something just came over me, and in minutes this brilliant writings would come up that made so much legal sense. I'd have to literally go and look up what I just wrote because I was like, what is this? You know, so I don't know, I guess I was channeling it, which I didn't necessarily do before, but these things happen over here, right?
Yeah, it sounds like your ancestors were very much involved.
Very much involved. So I went ahead and I started researching through that because every time I'd show up someplace, I would just have dreams and it would say, go here. And I would go to that place. Like one instance was I was told to go to the main library. And I live on the North Shore. So I didn't really want to go to the main library. That's a bit of a drive. I went anyway. And as I showed up, there was a person that helps me a lot. And she goes, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I go, "I don't know. There was a dream. I had to come here." And she says, "Well, what are you working on?" And I told her what I was working on. I go, "I need this case that says this." And she goes, "Oh, I know the case." So we're walking down the aisles of the books, and off from the shelf, the book dropped on the floor, opened up. And when we lifted it up, she goes, "Oh, this was the case I was going to tell you about." And lo and behold, one of the people in there was her ancestor and the other one was mine.
Wow.
There were so many things like this, just unfolding over and over again. The doors just kept opening up for me. So that was really helpful because not having any training in law or any of this thing, I was kind of an open, empty vessel. So they could tell me anything and lead me anywhere, and I'd basically go and follow to investigate it. But I wouldn't use anything unless I could find at least 3 sources saying the same thing, because I just didn't believe it myself. So anyway, I ended up learning about this, and I kept running across this thing called the doctrine of political question. And I saw that our titles, the original titles to my land, was based in Hawaiian Kingdom law. So I said, well, that's another nation. And then the other nation is the United States. So under the US Constitution, it says that under the separation of powers. Now the separation of powers is the legislature, the judiciary branch, and the executive branch. So under the separation of power, only the executive branch can speak to another nation. None of their courts, none of their state courts. So I said, okay, so now I need to know, how do I get an appointment with the president to talk about this?
The President of the United States.
Of the United States.
Yeah.
So that was President Obama at the time, and everybody was kind of laughing at me when I said, no, I need to speak to the president under the doctrine of political question. And I literally went to Geneva, Switzerland, to the UN Human Rights Conference, and I asked them, how do I get a seat with the president, an appointment? And there was all kinds of excuses, and I was like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be here. What is it that I'm supposed to get out of this? And so I just kept going and talking to people, and more people came and helped. You know, there was like more and more saying, oh, maybe you need to look at this, at this. Well, it took about 5 trips, and on this one particular trip, there were 6 of us that were supposed to go under this one NGO, which is a non-government organization that sponsors people to go into the UN. I was the only one that went. So that means they had 6 opportunities to speak at the session. After that, I started getting invited to meet with people. And it was during those meetings that I had one meeting where I asked the question, how is it that one nation could take another nation without the other nation agreeing? And they said it's not possible. So I asked this one particular independent expert to read the definition submitted to the United States by the United States of America to the UN to make Hawaii the 50th state. He ended up, guiding me through a process, because I said, well, we're still back at there's laws being asserted upon our lands and our kingdom that aren't supposed to be asserted here. How do I get that corrected? And so he gave me certain options, and I took one of the options, which resulted in a petition that I put into the UN last December, that was about 300 pages detailing the foreclosure on my house and the overtaxation, and then also the what was going on with all the infringements on our inheritances, not just mine, but everybody's inheritances that inherited lands through what was called the Mahele. And that was a land division in 1848 that gave most of us lands in perpetuity, which is called the allodial title.
Sure. All right. So now, Routh, you've gone on this amazing journey from city and county of Honolulu to state of Hawaii, to all of a sudden leapfrogging up to the international level at the UN. And so now what is happening today, right now, with your land and home? Where are you in all this?
I got a letter from the Property Tax Division that in about 3 weeks, they will be putting my house up for auction unless I pay them their, I'm going to call it ransom or extortion of money, you know, and so far I've refused. And so that's happening. So I actually got a letter from one of the human rights commissioners, independent experts, that agreed with my assessment of the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists. They call it a nation state in continuity.
So did you show this letter to the bank that it claims you owe the money?
I submitted it to the judge because it was addressed to the judge, the foreclosure judge.
Okay, and what did he say?
What did she say? She hasn't said anything. And so then I also submitted it to the land court because I'm in about 8 different cases. And some of it has to do with lands that I inherited that other people had warranty deeds on and went into foreclosure, but they pulled me onto it as well. And so it's a foreclosure matter. So I put the foreclosure and the land court judge on notice. And then I put the Attorney General on notice under their own rule, which is called Hawaii Revised Court Procedures 24D. And that is when you find that a statute is unconstitutional, that you ask the Attorney General to intervene. So I've asked for him to intervene to stop all cases, to recognize my protected persons status and the status of the lands, and that they cannot assert their laws here in the Hawaiian Islands. There's people like myself that have warranty deeds that have bought homes over here under U.S. law.
Sure, because you can't be alone. You can't be the only person this has happened to, yeah?
Almost everybody in Hawaii this has happened to.
Where do you go from here?
We go through to settlement and resolution, and the settlement and resolution will actually happen when we can find a win-win solution for the warranty deed owners or holders, because they're not owners, and the allodial title descendants who are essentially the owners. So we have to go into a settlement conference with that. That has to happen with the President of the United States under the doctrine of political question. So I've asked for an appointment for that to occur, and he just got delivered the letter from the UN, about 2 weeks ago.
The President of the United States?
The President of the United States.
Okay, so let me just ask you, you want a settlement, and other people like you in your situation want a settlement. Do you think all the other players, the U.S., the state of Hawaii, city and county of Honolulu, the banks and all those other people, do you think they want a settlement, or do you think they just want to steamroll people like you into submission?
They're going to try to steamroll me, probably. The problem is now I have an outside entity looking in.
The United Nations.
The United Nations, and we have shows like yours that are educating the people so they understand what are their rights. And this doesn't go into what their rights are, but it enlightens them that there's something more going on, and probably satisfies their curiosity because they thought something was off a little. So I think we'll be using some of the trusts that are out there that can assist. The trust being the Siddiqui Trust or the Strawman Trust. When there is debt, you can access those trusts. As a matter of fact, all the loans that the banks say that they've actually provided us came from those trusts. So essentially everybody is funding their own loans, and the bank has funded nothing. Wow. And that's under UCC codes, which says the promissory note is the legal tender and that banks cannot fund a loan. So there's ways to unravel this. Like you said, do the players want to participate and do this? Because game's up, right?
Yeah. All right, Ruth, Voices of Truth One-on-One with Hawaii's Future airs throughout Hawaii, and I'm sure there's somebody, maybe a few people watching us right now, who might be in the same exact situation that you are in.
Many.
Okay, what would you say to them? What's your recommendation and message to them right now?
Well, if you're a warranty deed owner, you need to understand who owns the land and what your rights are. I'd start looking at the title insurance, so that's one thing. But the heirs, a lot of times the heirs don't even know that they're heir to the land because they've been convinced all these generations that they have nothing, or they lost it, or it was bought or taken by eminent domain. So you have to research that. So you have to know your genealogy, because your genealogy is the golden ticket to the land. and then you have to understand the land. So you could do that by looking at birth certificates. So the way I got involved with my genealogy is Kamehameha schools, when we put our daughter in, demanded that we go back, several generations. I didn't know how to do that, so I hired a genealogist and I gave her the information that I knew, which wasn't too much, but she knew how the system worked. And she was able to pull up from a probate one of my great-grandfather's probates, and in there she found that there was lands given to us and there was a beautiful genealogy. I started researching it and asking a lot of questions and just went on this journey that opened up to something incredibly beautiful, which leads us to Kahana, because the majority of my family and the land that was given to us from the probate courts was in Kahana.
Right where we're standing right today.
Well, not this exact space, but in this Ahupua'a.
In this neighborhood. Wow.
Yes.
What an amazing story, Ruth. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
You're welcome.
And your advice to other people to do your genealogy, do your homework, do your research, and we really, really hope this comes to a really nice resolution for you all. Mahalo to our viewers. Remember, you can watch us on the web 24/7 on voicesoftruthtv.com, and you can like Voices of Truth One-on-One with Hawaii's Future on Facebook. I'm Ehu Kahu Cardwell for the Kiwani Foundation, along with Ruth here in beautiful Kahana. And until next time, ahui ho! Mahalo for watching Voices of Truth One-on-One with Hawaii's Future. Watch us on the web 24/7 at voicesoftruchtv.com. You'll find all our shows, including this one, in case you want to see it again or share it with family and friends. Also view our weekly video commentaries at freehawaiitv.com. And check out our blog, published daily, at freehawaii.info. It's all part of the Free Hawaii Broadcasting Network.